I am live. Hello, I'm Peter Karloftis with Three Rooms Press, and we are here today, Saturday, in the afternoon to have a special international launch for Nicca Ray's Ray by Ray, a daughter's take on the legend of Nicholas Ray. And we have Nicca here with us. We also have Chris D from Los Angeles. Nicca's here in New York, as I am. And we're going to have Samantha Fuller from the southwest of France. So this is going to be quite the international launch for this book, Ray by Ray, a daughter's take on the legend of Nicholas Ray. And as I hold this up, I am going to show you where to get the book right here. It's scrolling along the bottom of your screen right there. It tells you to come to Three Rooms Press Shop and order Ray by Ray, as you need a copy of this book. It's just quite a story, and it's told by the author who's here with us today. And I'm going to bring her up. And as I set this book down, we're going to bring up Nicca and have a little chat with her as we move forward with this live stream. Thank you for coming, and we're going to have a great time. So here comes Nicca. Hey!
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
Thanks for coming. Hi.
We're so happy to have you. You're on the east side. I'm on the west side. So,
yeah.
The old song, East Side, West Side. We're here in New York, both of us, and we're here to talk about your book, Ray by Ray. There it is. There she is in an earlier iteration with her father wearing the eye patch. And this is a daughter's take on the legend of Nicholas Ray, which we published. And it came out on April 28th, correct? That was the pub date. And
right.
Here we are. We had one celebration already, and this is our second. And there will be a few more to come. And so welcome.
It's so nice to be here. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm just so honored to have my book published by you guys. And
well, it was an honor publishing it, and we've had quite a journey together.
Yeah.
And, nowhere near the journey your dad had in his life, but what an amazing life Nicholas Ray had from his humble beginnings in Wisconsin to being an apprentice to Frank Lloyd Wright, correct?
Right. And then working in the theater with, and meeting Elia Kazan, and then going to Hollywood and working with Alan Lomax on Back Where I Come From, which was the first radio show to have black and white performers on the stage at the same time. So he was, he lived like 9 lives. Most people don't live the kind of life that he lived,
Certainly not anymore, but definitely through those years of the Depression and through the war and into that later post-war Hollywood scene. Sure. Yeah. Nobody lived as he did. So so many experiences in the book. Now, you never met. Yeah. I mean, you never had you don't have a photo with your father, and you only met him a handful of times, correct?
Correct. My parents separated when I was 2.5, and we were living in Madrid, and my mom brought my sister and I back to Los Angeles, and where I grew up. And I didn't see my father again until I was 13. So about 10 years passed, and then he died when I was 17. So I saw him a handful of times in my life. Yeah.
And this eventually led you to want to discover your connection. And that's where your book came from.
Absolutely. I had all these questions that I'd had since I was a child about my father. And I was in college, and I realized that, like so many people, I grew up not knowing my father, who I was in relationship to him. And unlike a lot of people, my father left behind this huge legacy. And so I decided to go out and find out about him. And I really didn't know the enormity of his legacy when I started. So yeah, it was years and years of going to archives and interviewing people and finding things out I never knew, and answering, and ultimately answering that question of who I am in relationship to Nicholas Ray and what it means to be his namesake.
Yes, quite a journey you took as well, finding him at a time when you did finally get to meet him and be somewhat of a grown child, and seeing what a bad influence he was at the time, and taking on those characteristics at that time, and kind of running with that to Hollywood, and kind of being a little too out of your league, self-destructively, which you didn't deserve. But that's what happened. That's as a legacy, hits you, and you don't have the ability to absorb what, to make your own decisions. It's hard to not, just fall right into that, which you did, and had a pretty crazy life at that time when you were about 12, 13, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it started around when I was especially after I saw my dad for the first time. I took off when I was 13. I got arrested when I was 14. I was going to, clubs on the Sunset Strip, by the time I was 15, and it was the 70s, and I had very little parental supervision. I had no parental supervision. And then, after my dad died when I was 17, the punk rock scene in LA was flourishing, and I just dove right into that. So, yeah, and I thought that was, when I was younger, I thought that was what connected me to my father, because I would read, he was, this rebellious film director, and he knew, I would go and read about him in books about how he understood the teenager, the rebellious teenager, the juvenile delinquent, and that was me. And so that's how,
This is what the outsider did. You just emulated what that miskin.
Well, I had that in me. It wasn't because I saw him doing it. It was like I had that in me. But what knowing that he had those issues too, or gave me permission in a sense. See, I'm like my dad,
Yeah. Well, listen. Let me go ahead and bring up. I'm going to introduce Chris to the audience, and then I'll put you together, and I'll leave you two alone for a little while. So hold on a second. I'm gonna take you off and bring up Chris D. 1 second. Here's Chris D from LA. He's out there. He's looking pretty good for earlier.
3 hours. 3 hours sleep. So
that's all.
Yeah, that's good.
The flesh eaters, man. How many nights did you do 3 hours? Come on.
Too many times, but considerably older now. I'm still not getting enough sleep. So, it takes a little longer to kind of tune in, but unlike Nicca, it took me a while to deal with issues of shall we say, outside chemical influences such as alcohol and certain medicinal things, cannabis, and of course beyond that, which we don't have to go into detail, but just my teenage years were fairly stable compared to Nicca's, and my dad was a scientist, and my mom was, I think, a frustrated artist. And I remember as a child, she took correspondence courses um, to be an artist, like a commercial artist or something, but she kind of gave that up by the time uh, we were, I had a brother and sister younger than me. And by the time I was 10, I don't really remember her pursuing that any longer. She just pretty much was housewife and a mom. Um, but my parents were very, despite my father being a scientist, my parents were very religious. So I was brought up Catholic, and I was kind of the black sheep from the get go in terms of um, that didn't really take hold till the last year or so I was in high school, because I had long hair, and it was 1969, 1970. And I graduated high school in June of 1970. And I remember I had to get my hair cut before graduation, or I wouldn't graduate according to the principal. So,
oh man.
And I was in a private Catholic boys' high school. I mean, it wasn't a lockdown or anything like that, but it was, was not co-ed. My mother was a secretary at the girls' Catholic high school across town. So most of the young gals I came in contact with when I was a teenager were from that high school, and they knew my mom. So that was formative in some ways of my introduction to interacting socially with the opposite sex, and having the women already actually knowing my mother. And then of course I would meet young women, girls from the street scene that did not know my mother, and that was more attractive to me. And they were usually a lot more hip, and anyway. But I got into the same thing as Nicca, and I was a little bit more circumspect. But I went off to college early when I was 17, moved to Los Angeles, went to film school at Loyola Marymount. But all the revival movie theaters were open still in Hollywood and in the rest of Los Angeles, because there was no video yet. And I was a big film buff. I was much more of a film buff. My second thing was music, and I kind of got into that by default. But I knew I knew Nicca's dad's movies from an early age, and he was always one of my favorite directors. I was really into film noir since I was in high school, and that term had really just come into use maybe 10 or 15 years before it was even, the French had come up with it, and then I think it started to come into common parlance in film reviews in the 60s.
Early 60s French New Wave there.
Yeah. Which I was thankfully I was exposed to a lot of European cinema, and then some Asian cinema as well, primarily Japanese cinema, from an early age. And I was interested in all movies from whatever country. It didn't have to just be the United States, but Nicca's dad was always one of my favorite directors. He was in my top 5. And back then I remember some of my other favorites were Fritz Lang, Samantha Fuller's dad, Sam. Who else? There was kind of deity and the deity, cinematic deity in the firmament that that inspired me and made me want to make movies. And
we're going to get into that, the similarities and dissimilarities of Sam Fuller and Nicca here in a minute. But I'm going to bring up Nicca now and let you two guys do some discussing about your similarities and dissimilarities as well. So Nicca, you know Chris, we did the show last week. And again, we have our pal, Eddie Muller says hello to all of us. So I might say that again.
Hello.
Yeah. Hey, Eddie.
I might say that again when we get Sam on. So let me get off and run her down, and then we will let you two guys talk for a little while about Nicholas Ray and your book, Nicca, Ray by Ray. Okay? So we'll see you in a little bit. I'll see you in a few. Enjoy.
See you in a few. Thank you. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Nicca.
How's it going?
So what should we talk about first? Should we talk about our teenage years, or should we talk about what was the first movie by your dad that you saw where you realized, oh, my dad directed that movie?
Well, I saw, how they would play like the midnight movie when we were kids. They would show those old movies on TV, and I In a Lonely Place would play. And so I would watch it till his name came up in the credits. It was kind of like, oh, he was visiting me through the television screen, but I never watched it all the way. The first movie that I saw of his in a theater from beginning to end, and I think it was the first movie I saw of his, was The Lusty Men with Robert Mitchum and Susan Hayward and Arthur Kennedy and Bernard Eisenschitz, who wrote the definitive autobiography of my father, was working on the book at the time, and I was in New York, and he took me to this theater called the Bleecker Street Theater, which was in the West Village. And he took me to see The Lusty Man. And, I fell in love with that movie. It's my favorite movie of my father's to this day. I just had a lot of identification.
It's a great movie. It's in my top 5 or 6 of your dad's movies. I'm a big Robert Mitchum fan too, so I think I wish your Robert Mitchum had made 1 or 2 more movies with your dad. I guess they probably met quite a bit before that. I mean, I think Macau.
I'm sorry.
Macau came before Lusty Men, right?
I'm sorry. This is dropping. I'm having some issues, I guess. I didn't hear that. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I had my hand up near the mic. Maybe that's what was doing it.
Oh, okay. Robert Mitchum, you were talking about Robert Mitchum.
Yeah. Do you remember how your dad, do you have any anecdotes about when they first met?
From what I learned when they were working on The Lusty Men, Robert Mitchum had never worked with improvisation or Strasberg or any of that, so he was just like, what is this guy talking about? I'm just used to like hitting my mark. The director comes in and says, stand there, we're gonna shoot that, and my dad was like, well, what's your character's motivation? Like, what do you want from the scene? Like all that, like method acting, which wasn't common in Hollywood. My father, along with Elia Kazan and these guys, brought that way of acting to Hollywood. So and even like when they started working on The Lusty Men, they didn't have a completed script. So my father would have worked through improvisation and built a script through that. So, you know, he would throw out an idea about what was happening with these characters and the story, and then the actors, including Robert Mitchum, would go for it, and they got some sort of idea of, you know, how the script would be. And Robert Mitchum, you know, later said that Nick was one of his favorite directors. And, you know, it was always said about my father that he was an actor's director, and he got some of the best performances from actors. And Robert Mitchum was, you know, sold on Nick Ray after working on The Lusty Men. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm you know, Robert Mitchum is somebody too that was really a kind of a, I don't want to say a closet intellectual, but he was really well read, and he'd also been all over the South and the Midwest as a teenager, and had probably been to a lot of the places that your dad and Alan Lomax had been in the South.
Oh, yeah.
And he had seen the world, and he had come up through the Depression, and you know, probably a little bit more economically disadvantaged than your dad, but I get the feeling he had a similar take on the world. He was kind of a you know, of course, a worldly guy, and I imagine he and your father, knowing how little patience they had with studio protocol and with bosses, probably bonded a little bit over that once they got to know each other better. The kind of anti-establishment.
Yeah.
You know, the suit.
Yeah, they were both rebellious.
The suits.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hello up there.
I'm jumping on here because we have Samantha on now. So,
Exciting.
well, it is exciting. All the way from the southwest of France. I guess you could just say the south of France, in Occitania, I think. I don't ever try to pronounce French very often because I always say it wrong. Anyhow, so what I'd like to do, if I can, is bring her up for a second, introduce her, and then bring you back up, Nicca, and have you two meet, which you have never met. And then I'm going to have her read the introduction, or we'll have her read the introduction, then bring you guys up so you can already have something to bounce off of. And then I'm going to bring you back up, Christy, and let you loose with those two, and to dig into their both the filmographies and styles of those two maverick outsiders who have so many similarities, but as many dissimilarities, and there's a lot to talk about here. So let me. I'm going to take you two guys off for a second, and I'm going to bring up Samantha, and she's going to read the intro, and then I'm going to bring you up with her, Nicca. Okay? So we know what we're doing. All right. See you in a minute.
All right. Bye.
And here comes Samantha Fuller, who is the namesake daughter of Sam Fuller, Samuel Fuller, maverick director, around the same time, a contemporary of Nicholas Ray. And we are pushing the Ray by Ray, Nicca Ray. And there's Samantha's name. And we're going to bring up the real person right now. She wrote the introduction to this book. Here's Samantha Fuller. Hey, welcome.
Hey.
Welcome from Occitania. Huh?
Oui.
Oui.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I tell the French when I pronounce things wrong. I said I already had one mother. I don't need 40 million other ones. But and you have
Hey.
a mother too, who is you're working on her memoir, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. After my father's, here come my mother.
Okay, all right. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and we're talking about 6,000 miles or 7,000 miles between you and Chris D out on the West Coast. So it's a real international launch for our book, and we're honored to have you join us. Thank you so much. Would you mind reading the intro to?
Absolutely.
I think everybody can learn a lot more about you and both how your feelings about Nick Ray and your father right there. And I think that in those words, let's get down to it. And then I'm going to bring Nicca in to introduce you to, and we can talk about a little something, and I'll leave you two alone for a minute. Then I'll bring in Chris D. So we've got a plan. And I look forward to hearing you. And thank you so much for writing that intro. It's very moving to me, and it was a great moment when I got it in the mail. Thanks.
Pleasure was mine.
I'm leaving you all alone on the stage. Don't freeze on me, okay?
Yeah, good connection here.
Good.
Seems to be working fine.
It's amazing, right? What a new world. I think we'll be doing this a lot more as, even if we get back, if we go through to the other side. I think we'll be doing a lot of this live streaming, and just look at what we're capable of here with, just doing it, just boom, here we're on the stage. All right.
Yeah.
So,
pretty cozy stage.
It is. Thank you.
So, all right, Peter, I will now read the introduction, pretty much a letter to Nicca, who I never met, but who I look forward to meeting soon. And it was a real honor to be asked to do this because it allowed me to reflect a little bit about my father's history and my connection to him. And here we go. So, my introduction to Ray by Ray. Film historians frequently talk about Ray and Fuller in the same breath. Jean-Luc Godard lovingly dedicated his noir film, Made in USA, to Nick and Samuel, who raised me to respect image and sound. Both mavericks influenced a number of up-and-coming French directors as they created their own new wave. They also fathered cinema sons like Wim Wenders, Jim Jarmusch, Curtis Hanson, Dennis Hopper, and quite a few others. Wenders playfully cast both directors in The American Friend, and on the set, Sam confessed to Nick that he never really liked these rebel without a cause kids from upper middle-class families, because he himself was a poor boy and had to make sure that a single mother with 7 children had food on the table. Nick didn't take it personally and smiled understandingly, puffing his gitane while Sam offered him a Havana. Our fathers were 2 big souls who shunned competition and devoted most of their lives to the 7th art. Nick embraced the Beat Generation, finding great fault in America's role in the world leading up to and following World War II. My father, the son of Russian immigrants, enlisted in the infantry and fought for the opportunities this country afforded him. The 2 artists embraced opposing philosophies, yet from their very different vantage points, they searched for the truth about America. Both rebels rejected politics and authority as false gods. Their method was to tell hard-hitting stories paired with powerful imagery. Happy endings were not their concern. They embraced the new technology of CinemaScope during the years at Fox Studios, and their professional lives intersected as they employed the same cast and crew on multiple occasions. Ray's Johnny Guitar and Fuller's China Gate, composed by Victor Young, are among my personal favorite connections. Actors directed by both include Robert Ryan and the legendary James Dean, who made his very first big screen appearance in Fuller's Fixed Bayonets in 1951. Already the biography by Bernard Eisenschitz, Nicholas Ray, An American Journey, left a deep impression, but the personal account by Nicca shines a new light on an unforgettable artist and father. Hopefully, more generations will discover the great movies of Nick Ray thanks to Nicca's dedication. When I was asked to write this introduction to Nicca Ray's poignant and riveting book about a relationship with her father, I was very touched that she would think of me. Being the daughters of such independent spirits as Nick Ray or Sam Fuller, I understand that honoring such a legacy can be daunting. Both Nicca and I lost our fathers at an early age, so we were naturally curious about their body of work in order to know them better. Understanding their creations was a way of understanding who we are. Nicca and I inherently carry on their legacy, and even though they had different life stories reflected in very different bodies of work, they both held within them a deep empathy that modern society is losing. They were reminding us that humanity cannot live without emotion. And that's that, my friends. Hope you enjoyed.
That was very enjoyable, and what an eloquent
one take.
Just it's wonderfully put, sentimental. It just sums up everything about both those directors, their emotion, and what I want to do now is, and I thank you again for reading that and joining us and writing the introduction in the first place. But I want to bring up Nicca now. You've never met. Maybe
be fun.
Maybe you've Googled each other. I don't know. That's today. That's in the world now. But through those years, all those years,
nothing like an in-person meeting.
There you go. So we're gonna bring up Nicca now and have you guys get together for the first time. So look at that.
Cheers, hi. Nicca.
Cheers. I've got
put it together.
All right. This is fun.
It's so nice to meet you. Oh my God. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. It touched me so deeply. Hearing you read it now, like the first time I read it, but like then seeing your face and yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure our dads would be getting a kick out of this.
I think they are.
You think? I think.
I mean, their spirits live through their film, and they live through you. And whatever those pieces are, they live through you. Are definitely getting a kick out of that because you are getting a kick out of it. And a very special moment, I think, here. We're sharing.
I'm sure most people who are listening are already familiar with their films, but hopefully there's some newcomers, and some people will discover them still.
And I wanted to say again that Eddie said hello to everybody. So
the great Eddie Muller.
Yeah, he wanted to.
Cheers to him too.
We mentioned him, and of course you're going to meet up with Chris again, whom you know, right?
Absolutely.
A little more familiar with your mom, but I'm not sure about that. I think that's what you said last time. Now you have to humor me for 1 minute because the one thing I like most of all about film is cross-referencing. Let me get over here. So
perfect.
Cross-referencing all the different films. There's one film besides American Friend that they were both in, of course. Both Nick and Sam were both in American Friend, Wim Wenders, 1977, I think it was.
Yeah, though they didn't have any scenes together, but
no. But they were in
the
same film. So their only other connection in the same film is The Racket, 1951. And Sam was an uncredited writer, and Nick was an uncredited director. But it's just amazing how many things come back around just from this one movie. First of all, Howard Hughes was the producer. So that he was who held off on They Live by Night. Right, so he was the studio head for They Live by Night. Anyhow, so the crossover is he was an unaccredited director, Ray, and the other directors were Tay Garnett, uncredited, who did Postman and One Way Passage and a few other movies. that were one-way passages, an old famous, where they're dead on the boat. There was the first version, 1932, Warner Brothers, William Powell. So anyhow, then Mel Ferrer was also one of the uncredited directors who had only one credit to directing, which was Fury with Claudette Colbert and Robert Ryan. Your connection there of
a Ryan connection.
Dangerous Ground.
It intersects so many different ways. What a web.
Flying Leathernecks. Then there was Sherman Todd, was the editor of the book, and he was also, the editor of the movie, and he had a lot of editing credits, but he was also a director for some reason. I guess he jumped in between one of these other guys, and he had written, where's Sherman Todd? Darn it, I can't find my note. Anyhow, he was involved in
some great trivia there, Peter.
I know. Yeah. The writer, William Wister Hines, he wrote Black Legion, Bogart's Black Legion back in 1936, but he also worked with Bogart that Bogart brought him in to work on In a Lonely Place and Knock on Any Door.
Okay.
So if we keep going through this, there's just High Sierra. W.R. Burnett is the other writer who wrote High Sierra, Asphalt Jungle, and one of these guys won an Academy Award for. He won the Academy Award for One Way Passage. The writer, he won an Academy Award for that.
Fun facts.
So
those were the days.
Here they
were around for that.
1951, and they probably never saw each other then either.
I'm sure they knocked a couple drinks back. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
And the one thing that through everything is that there's nobody. I told you this the other day, Samantha. There's nobody put as much energy from the start of a scene to the end of the scene than Samuel Fuller, and the way they just came together. That's the film. This is what the film is, and I think that he got most of his life from going across those battlefields, and that's what just gave him that drive to
you can imagine 4 years of the infantry.
Exactly.
Being on set is a walk in the park.
No. And absolutely making a film is the walk.
And he was there to have a good time. That's for sure.
Nick had the theater as a background, and I think that his greatest gift was drawing out those performances.
Oh, yes.
Of the actors. And it just two different things, but both of them got the job done, and both of them were just original, unbelievable mavericks in the film industry then, which could have easily gone just straight to the actors at that time, and they were two of the reasons why they didn't, because they were the auteurs. I
love their on-screen performance as well, by the way. I wish they would have both acted more.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah.
So which was the one you were in? Street with Samantha? Street with Street? What is it?
What do you want to talk about?
You're
Freedom of No Return.
Freedom of No Return. You were like a fan in that, like a rock fan.
That's right. I acted a few times with my father.
And your mother was a nurse, and Sam
in White Dog. That's right.
And Sam was he was the police commissioner, right?
Yeah, and Street. Yeah, he liked to do it. Put himself.
All right,
cameo too. I sure wish I would have worked more often with my father too. Had he not had me so later on in life, would have been a blast.
I'm going to put you guys together for a while and let you, after you've absorbed this wonderful introduction she read. I know that you two have a lot to say, and then I'm going to bring up Chris with you, and you can get more deeply into the film, the films themselves. All right, so you guys go at it. I'm jumping out of here after going crazy about the racket and making a lot.
What a racket! What a mess!
Racket about
what a racket!
All right, here.
Look into that. All right. Okay. All right. So
hi. Hi.
All right.
So
nice to see you, Nicca.
I've been dying to ask you, I watched Fuller Life, your documentary, and I was, you were in your dad's studio with all his body of work, and I just like, how did you go through all his body of work and narrow it down for your documentary? Like, I know, like, my dad had this huge body of work that, I went to the archives, like the Warner Brother archives, all the archives and the film libraries, and that's how I got, to see his body of work. And when it came down time to choose what I wanted to focus on in my book, I had to like let things go to the side. And so when I was watching you walk through his office and the typewriter and all his scripts and his movies and all of that, I just thought, like, what were you feeling at that time when you like, just, I'm going to do this thing and here's all his work? Like, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I think we both went through quite a different process, in fact, with our projects. I mean, first of all, not just only the format, because I understood that you were writing your book for many years. As for me, I had decided to make this film, within a year, I had decided to make the film, I had it made. So it was quite a speedy process, on the contrary. And I did have the advantage to have access to all my father's material, at home that we had kept. I'd preserved his office intact since the day he'd passed away. Nothing had changed much. Everything was in place except for the celluloid film we trusted the Academy with. But other than that, all the archives are at home, and I had access to them, and I had a lot of time ahead of time to familiarize myself with them. And the documentary was based on his autobiography, and I was present when he had been writing it. So I had many years actually, and then my mother had edited it for 4 years after he passed away, and spent a lot of time on that posthumously, putting it together with our friend and collaborator Jerry Rudis. And so I already had quite an idea of how I would put a shortened version of this book together in a visual style. And from the moment I thought about doing it, we got right to work shooting it within a year, because I wanted to have it ready for his centennial, for his 100th anniversary. And so that was in 2012. And but I gotta say, I got a lot more than I bargained for, because I didn't expect it to be, I mean, of course, it's a very personal project, but I didn't expect it to make me miss him so much again, and go through the grieving process all over, in a way. One never really heals from it, but and there hasn't been a day really that's gone by since my father passed away that we haven't been speaking about him, let alone think about him. He's very present still, and my mother and I are still very active, carrying on his legacy, because he was so prolific. There's still many more projects that need to see the day of light. But so, I mean, it was very different for you and I, but I must say that what we do share is that our fathers are gone now, and that we have this great body of work that remains for us to reflect upon, and still, find out about them and discover a little bit more about who they were, and in fact, reflect upon ourselves through that process.
Absolutely, and to share their work with younger generations, and their independent, their spirit, and I think that that's really important for young filmmakers to get to know their work, to be true to their vision, no matter what it takes to stand up for what they have to say in the way that they want to say it. I was going through some notes and stuff, and I think I was reading through The Third Face, and how your dad, he was talking about how he was given lots of scripts to do, and with lots of famous actors attached, but he chose not to do those because he wanted to do what he wanted to do, you know, and it wasn't about the money, you know, and that's like kind of a difference between your father and my father. My father was kind of addicted to the prestige and the power and the glory, and he had a huge gambling problem, so he needed to make money.
More money to spend more money. Yeah, my father was a minimalist. He did blow a lot of money up in smoke with cigars, I gotta say.
Cigars.
But he managed to barter his way to work on scripts for cases of cigars, and worked his way around that. But they really had different personalities and different lifestyles. That's for sure. And even though they have many, you know, common points, they couldn't differ anymore when it comes to their personal life and their family life, especially.
Absolutely. You know, your father, obviously I don't know him, but from his work, I read The Third Face when it first came out. You know, he seemed very grounded, solid, you know, and that comes through in his movies. You know,
I definitely would relate that to a more sturdy upbringing and a very strong, you know, confident mother.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to psychoanalyze our fathers, but they also had very different upbringings.
Absolutely. I was going through my interview with Wim Wenders that I did a long time ago, and he talked about how different our fathers were. And I just wanted to read, if you don't mind, what he said. He said, Nick was such an elegant man, such, if I may say so, such an intellectual, such a thinker, philosopher, and Sam was so much a storyteller. Sam's approach to filming was so different than Nick's, and their films are worlds apart, although they may be inhabited by a very similar spirit of rebellion and of the exact knowledge of what they could do best. They were both some of the rare authors, I think, in their time. Not many people took such a stand in their films like these two different stands, but it was incredible to see them shake hands and look at each other. Sam so small and Nick so tall. Isn't that cool?
Go Vim. All right. Oh, he put that very well. Absolutely. There's a wonderful photograph of the two of them on the set.
Yes.
The American Friend. Have you seen that one? Both puffing away?
Yes.
Absolutely. I wish I had it with me. I'd hold it up.
I think you have it.
Yeah, it's
I
wonderful.
think it's in the book. I think it's in, Ray by Ray.
Here it is.
Vim has permission to use it. There you go. There are ads.
All right, there you go. Well, hey, I'm sure they're puffing away up wherever they are.
Right? I hope they're smiling big, you know, whoever thought. I mean, this is like such an honor to just be here and talking about our fathers and you know, the whole like namesake thing. There feels like a responsibility in being a namesake and not, you know, it's something unique, I think, that we share, you know.
Absolutely. And how's your relationship with your siblings, if I may ask, when it comes to that?
My sister and I are very close. Yeah.
Does she also enjoy going to screenings and presenting? Or you team up on that? No,
not so much. She's lived a life removed, whereas I always wanted to be a part of, you know. Yeah.
All right. I was curious. Yeah, no, because I'm an only child, and I was wondering what it would be like if there were several of us.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
my half brothers, they have their own stories. Tony, my father's first son, he passed away about a year ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And he had his struggles, you
Mhm.
know, but he was very supportive of me doing this. He allowed me to interview him for days and stayed in touch with me, and was always like so supportive. It was the first time he ever talked about his relationship with Gloria, you know. You
Yeah.
know, it, and
I mean, you
my
got very personal in your book when it came to that too.
yeah.
That was different. You know, when I was telling my father's story through the documentary, of course, I wanted to talk about his upbringing and connect his personal life to characters in his film. But when it comes into, you know, trying to understand a little bit more, you know, his background and bringing to light his marriages and his personal life, I couldn't really go there. That
Well,
was very brave of you.
I wonder though how much that had to do. You grew up with him. I
Mhm.
didn't grow up with my father. I only saw him a handful of times in my life. So I I grabbed at everything that I could to build my own picture of him, you know?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah, that's very, very beautiful and very brave of you to have done that.
thank you.
Yeah. So
Right.
what are we doing here?
I'm coming back now, except I think I want to hire you to replace me, Samantha, because you're doing such a wonderful job with Nicca that who needs me? I'm going to go, I'm going to go to this.
Come on. You know, by the way, while I was waiting to come on the show here, I was listening to Lightning Over Water, Ronnie
Oh,
Blakely's beautiful song.
oh yes.
And I do encourage anyone out there to go on YouTube and listen to it because it is fabulous. And that movie, by the way, is just
It's so
absolutely
great.
mind-blowing, and I can't even imagine what it must be like for you to experience that.
Well, the lightning over water, I write about it in Ray by Ray. I've come to love that movie and to see it as, such a brave thing to do, to face death, to share your death with not just the crew, but audience and
And family especially, who's gonna be
family.
hearing this.
Yeah. I saw the movie in a private screening room in Los Angeles, about a year or year and a half after he passed away. I was not emotionally ready to
Who
see it.
was Vim at the screening, or who was at the
Vim.
screening?
Well, Vim was there. Chris Severnick took me. I don't know who else was there. Suits, people in suits. I was
Oh,
like
really?
punk rock, my
Yeah.
chains and my, all that, and my spiked leather jacket. I wasn't going to cry. I was tough,
Yeah.
Um,
And your siblings, did they
so
come? Your
then,
sister, brother?
no, it was just me. And my mom came with me, and then Chris, my mom had to go right back to work, and Chris took me out to lunch and then bought me a bunch of punk rock records at Rhino Records. And,
Little diversion there.
it, then several years later,
Were you
Chris
upset?
and Lillian
Were
gave
you
me,
mad? Were you mad? Like, how could he do this? Or were you
oh yeah,
what?
I didn't understand. Like I'd never had seen anyone sick with cancer, let alone dying from cancer. I
Let
hadn't
alone your own
spent time
father.
with my
Yeah.
father.
That just
Yeah,
really
that
blows
he
my
was
mind.
sharing himself. Yeah, I was, very ill-equipped to deal with that. But over the years, there's been different a process of understanding just how important it was for him to make that film, loving them for making it possible. I credit them for bringing my dad back into the public eye with casting him in The American Friend, because my father's peers really didn't want to have anything to do with him. And Milos Forman, who I also interviewed for the book, he cast my dad in Hair, and these guys.
So great in Hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're really great in front of the camera, but in Lightning Over Water, that's not acting there. And I don't know. Just really, I find you incredibly strong, and I'm very impressed by you being able to, despite that, keep taking it on and keep carrying on that legacy.
Thank you. I really look forward to meeting you in person.
Someday, somewhere.
Been very intimate, I think, where we is really intimate and just wonderful. I felt the same way with you the other day when we met and did a little rehearsal. You're just, I want you on screen all the time with everything we do, because you just add such a,
Hey,
just like your dad, you got that solidity. You're just solid, man. You're solid.
I'll give you another 5 minutes and then I got to go.
Yeah, really? Do you really?
A few more. I do have a call at 9 p.m., but that's cool.
Let me get Chris up here with you guys so that I can spend a little time with you. I didn't know that. And Chris, I'm bringing you up.
Okay.
There's Sam. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. Hi, Samantha.
Here.
Yeah. I
How's it going in LA?
I just saw your mom a couple months ago at a mutual friend's house. Actually, it was around Christmas, and it was at our mutual friend Dennis Bartok's house.
All right.
And I worked with Dennis.
Dennis Bartok.
Long live the Cinematheque.
Yeah, I was on the programming staff in the between 1999 and 2009, and but I had met your dad back in 1980, right around the time the Big Red One came out. And I was writing, and actually I was the editor of the last couple of issues for this punk rock music journal called Slash Magazine,
right,
which also became a record label. And my girlfriend, Judith, at the time, who was a big film buff, she had gone to UCLA Film School, and I had gone to Loyola Marymount. And I really wanted to interview Sam for the last big issue we were doing, because I thought Sam embodied so much of that kind of truth-telling that a lot of the music represented, and a lot of the attitude. And I don't remember how I got in touch with him, but we did come up to the famous garage office with all his memorabilia all over the walls. And
you survived the shack. How long did he keep you in there?
We were there for at least a couple hours. Judith and I took photos, and we talked about quite a few of his movies. And I'm hoping, I've got a PDF of his interview I did that I'm hoping to put in a book eventually. But one of the ways I know Nicca is not just through her dad's movies, but we had a lot of friends in common in Hollywood at the 1980s, although we did not meet then. I didn't meet Nicca until about 10 years ago, when I was with my ex-girlfriend Donna, who was one of Nicca's best friends. And they had grown close during the 1990s, going to the New School, and also waitressing together. And they were both, Donna was also very into film, was very familiar with actually probably both your dad's movies, probably a little bit more with Nick's. But anyway, what I loved about your dad, Samantha, is that he was so opinionated, and you could say one thing, and he would go off on not tangents, but everything was kind of cosmically linked.
Yeah.
And
He'd take the long way around. He'd say, "Let me make a long story short," but it would last forever and ever and ever, and he'd circle and circle and circle, and boom, he'd come back and hit the bullseye. Okay,
Yeah.
that was connected.
But I just loved hearing his take on things, and you know, there's so many characters. Even though your two fathers' movies were different, in some ways, there are, you know, they both only used close-ups when they were going to express emotion, and that, you know, there are a lot of directors will just throw in close-ups and they won't have any meaning. Both Sam and Nick both put a price on, and I don't mean a monetary price, but an emotional price on the tools of cinema, and they didn't use close-ups gratuitously. They did it when characters were going through their heavy moments. And I remember Andrew Saris writing about the first close-up, and I shot Jesse James, and comparing it to who was it, Carl Dreyer or Bresson? I can't remember which. But your dad too, Nicca, the way he used close-ups in movies.
By the way, both our dads made Jesse James yarns.
I
That's
know.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They had that
Yeah.
common point as well.
Right, Wagner.
It reminded me when you said Jesse James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I saw
Yeah.
I saw both your dad's movies on late night television when I was a teenager, still in high school in the 60s. I was living in Riverside. When I moved to LA, all the Revival movie theaters were still open. Both your dad's movies would play occasionally, not the vast array that you can, you know, the variety that you can find today on video. But I remember seeing, not only did I see The Lusty Men and on Dangerous Ground and Rebel Without a Cause and movies like that at a movie theater, but I also saw Steel Helmet, Pick Up on South Street, House of Bamboo, oh, what else? China Gate. In fact, I programmed China Gate at the Cinematheque in the, I don't know when it was. It was shortly a year or two before Gene Barry died, who was the star. And I remember being in the theater watching the movie, and Gene Barry was sitting in the aisle behind me. But the kind of characters that both your dads put in their movies, they were always, in some ways, they were butting up against their exact polar opposites in the movie. Like Gene Barry's character in China Gate was a very racist, mercenary guy, and he had gotten together with Angie Dickinson, who played a Vietnamese half-caste woman.
Lucky Lake.
And they'd had a son together. And that was very much the kind of situation that I think your dad, Nick, would have.
Well, they did love, per se, fucked up heroes. Let me put it that way.
Yes.
You know, flawed heroes.
Flawed heroes, yeah.
They loved the flawed hero. Because my dad would say that if you can't relate to what this person is doing, then, you have to have some flaw, to make them human. The hero can't be like a Superman, they have to be human.
And a
Our
flaw,
fathers.
it makes you feel good. It's actually a gift to the audience. It's quite empowering.
Yeah.
If you can connect with your.
Well, the
Yeah.
thing that's great too is that there are no judgments from either director on these characters, and you showed them change because they come in contact with people that push their buttons, either emotionally or politically or their very nature of their existence existentially. And the one thing I want to bring up when you two are both still here before you got to go, Samantha, is your dad's made two of my favorite Westerns of all time, Johnny Guitar and 40 Guns.
The two strong ladies too.
Oh,
Barbara
Crawford
Stanwyck
and Stanwyck.
right?
Yeah.
I know.
I think
Amazing.
from what I understand, Ray had a hard time with Crawford. My dad got along
Oh,
strong
yeah.
with Stanwyck. Yeah, she was.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, my dad said that he would throw up on the way to the set every morning because Joan Crawford was such a problem. And there was also, like, I think the power struggle. Like, that was my dad's first movie outside of the studio system. And he'd really hoped that he would be producer, he would have more control, and Joan Crawford actually had more control than him on the production end, and it really soured him. And that's when he started thinking about going to Europe and leaving Hollywood. But then Rebel Without a Cause came along, and James Dean.
What's interesting is, from what I understand, he gave a lot of power to James Dean on the set of Rebel. So it's funny, coming off of a power play with Crawford, he'd go on to Rebel and give up a lot of his authority because he was so enamored with James Dean.
Well, a lot of people, but a lot of people had that impression that he gave James Dean all this power. And when I talked to Dennis, and Dennis was one of those people when he was younger, thought that my dad relinquished all this power to James Dean. But in fact, it was he let, I wish I had Dennis Hopper's quote with me right now, but he gave James Dean the room that he knew James Dean needed to be James Dean. So in a way, my dad stepped back to let this masterpiece of an actor inhabit. And Jim Stark, so I don't know if that makes sense.
Very, very different than with Crawford. That's why coming from one movie to another, and on one not, having this power play with his lead actress, and then going on to Rebel, and then pretty much letting the actor, act more freely.
I had heard that.
Well, yeah, because they had that identification, and he became. My dad just loved all the actors on that movie, and I spoke to Frank Mazzola, Dennis Hopper, Corey Allen, just about how my dad kind of took them under his wing, and they would spend all this time together. I think that they in a way had an equal partnership, which kind of makes sense that my dad would love to work that way, because he came from the theater and the theater of action in the 30s. Like, all those actors who were a member of that group lived together. They did everything together. And I think that, and then, like, when he was working with Alan Lomax actually lived with my dad and my dad's first wife, Jean, and Lead Belly, and everybody would come over, and they'd have these sing-alongs, which were the sing-alongs which back where I come from, the radio program that my dad and Alan Lomax did for CBS Radio, the format of that show was based on the sing-alongs from those evenings. So yeah.
From what I understand,
rather, you know,
Ray was a lot more comfortable in a fusional relationship with his actors. I think it was a lot more distant with Crawford, and the bond he had with Salminio,
yes.
James Dean, and Hopper at the time, they had this, more intimate connection that probably let him give him space.
I had heard that before the movie that Nick Ray and James Dean went on a cross country ride together. They drove across the country together, and that's how they had found out about each other. I think Jim Jarmusch said this, or when he was his assistant at NYU over here, had found that out, that they drove across the country. What a show that would be, huh?
Yeah, would have liked to be a little fly on the window of that car.
Yeah. I mean, we could do it now. Let's make it up. Let's write the script.
Let's do it. So you have to go?
Are you going to have to leave us?
Yeah, just a second. But we could go on, and we could have a real fun trivia connecting all the points between Ray and Fuller, I got to say, because there are many, many. It's a long list.
We sure could.
One thing I want
it's
to
a
encourage,
long list.
One thing I would like to encourage people who are watching this to really look up when you see a movie by a director you like, or I don't want to make directors the sole auteur of movies. I think I am kind of a fan of the auteur theory, but there's a lot of writers who really helped shape movies, and of course, both your fathers wrote, and a lot of times Nick wrote uncredited. Sam worked on all his scripts. In fact, Sam wrote most of his scripts.
Yeah, he was a ghostwriter too.
Yeah, and but I want to encourage people watching this to if you see a movie and you really like it, note who the director is. Check out their filmographies on the internet. It's easier now than ever before. I know pre-internet, it was a nightmare trying to do research. You'd have to go to the library and find film books and piece things together just through your own kind of detective work. It's much easier today. But I want to say, Eddie Muller, who I think is watching this, works for Turner Classic Movies, and they really keep the flame alive as far as both your father's work. There's going to be House of Bamboos on this week on Turner Classic Movies. Crimson Kimono, Steel Helmet, and Nicca. Your dad's movies have been on a lot lately, and they play both your father's movies quite often, and a wide variety of them too, which is nice. You don't just get the most famous ones. You get the ones that were studio projects, like Pickup on South Street, that had, the more A-list stars, and House of Bamboo, which were both 20th Century Fox. But then you've got the independent films like Steel Helmet, and some of the later films that Sam did, like Shock Corridor, and later did with Curtis Hanson, like White Dog and stuff like that. So there's really a wealth of stuff out there to investigate for people.
Oh yeah, Turner's just great, and Eddie too. He's really the best in his field. The expert of noir.
I don't think a month doesn't go by that one of their films is not played on Turner Classic Movies. Either Sam Fuller, Nick Ray, maybe both. So you've got a lot of chance to learn about them.
And Criterion has a few streaming of each as well.
Right.
Criterion streaming is a wonderful platform for that. But they definitely, they have a very different style, but each were auteurs in their own righteous way, and they stuck to their guns.
They sure did.
And that's why we love them.
They sure did.
And
that is why we love them. That's why we celebrate.
lived through the Hollywood golden age. And there won't be times
They
like
sure
that
did.
anymore.
Yeah,
No.
and it's especially during the early 50s. It's nice that there were even studio heads that appreciated your father, Samantha, like Daryl Zanuck, who gave your father a lot of opportunities he certainly wouldn't have gotten probably at Warner Brothers. And of course later your dad did movies at Columbia and did movies. I guess Muriel's Marauders was I think a Warner Brothers movie, but
Took him forever to get Big Red One off the ground.
yeah.
Decades.
It's the
Really?
further away we get from that release date of Big Red One, the more I appreciate how monumental a task it was for your dad to get that done and get it out. And it's really great that he got to do it.
Very cathartic. I'd say, Park Row and Big Red One are the most personal films to him.
Sure. He came up working for the newspaper. Sure.
Yeah, those are the two. And for your dad, Nicca, I don't know. I'd maybe say Bigger Than Life.
Bigger Than Life,
personal. Yeah. How do you? Which movie do you see your father in most? Transferred into.
I see him in A Lonely Place. I see him in A Lonely Place. I see him in Bigger Than Life. Absolutely.
I think
I see him in every movie except for like King of Kings and 55 Days at Peking, those big old epics.
Yeah, but in A Lonely Place, definitely Bigger Than Life. It couldn't be any clearer. Yeah. And for my father, it's definitely Park Row and the Big Red One. And
right.
It's always interesting to see the author coming through and see how he put himself in a different character. And in those cases, you can rewatch them over and over again and try to analyze every move they choreographed.
Yeah.
It's like the beginning of They Live by Night with that intimacy between the two characters. I think you see Nick in both of those characters, it being his initial, foray into film. That innocence comes out of them. That is his innocence too. I think it's right there, and it also carried on into James Dean, the beginning of A Rebel Without a Cause. When you see him, very similar, those two. That carried on, and maybe he found that innocence again through Dean that he had with Father Preacher and Kathy O'Donnell.
Yeah, very personal, and so is your book, Nicca. I gotta say that
thank you.
Moving.
Sam, I want to hire you. You're perfect.
I had a great time, everybody.
Yeah, you were fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure, everybody. Take care.
It was so great.
Good to see you, Samantha.
We'll all get together for real on the other side.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Goodbye, South of France.
Bye.
Au revoir, les amis.
Thank you.
Everyone be well.
Thank you.
You
too.
Stay safe. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Hello.
Hey.
Hello there.
Wow. She was so refreshing, huh?
Yeah.
That was just so perfect. I didn't want to take you guys off together, just the two.
I could have talked for hours.
I didn't want to take you off, I didn't want to see it end. And it hasn't, because Chris is still here, and you guys have a lot still to talk about from the past. You can still go over shows that you were probably at. That
right.
Plenty of shows. I can duck out here for a little bit. Why don't you guys go where you want to go and we'll have about 10, 15 more minutes. What do you think?
That's fine. Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. See you in a bit.
See you in a bit. So
hey,
that was
Eddie Muller. If you're still watching, get Nicca on Turner Classic Movies on Noir Alley, or get a night where you've got nothing but Nick Ray movies and have Nicca come on and do a chat with you. That would be awesome.
They will be showing the movies on Friday, June 19th. There will be 3 Nick Ray films. There will be They Live by Night. There will be Rebel Without a Cause and In a Lonely Place. They will play in that order on Friday evening. And I'm not sure if Eddie will be involved, but we did send him a copy of the book. And they're still waiting to get back to us on what the plan is. But they will be featuring the book Ray by Ray, our daughter's take on the legend of Nicholas Ray. So that's a good thing. And I don't know, but my idea with Eddie is that we get both Sam and Nicca on there, Samantha, and get Vim on there, and let's show American Friend. I think it'd be great to have all of you on there. You know what I mean?
That would be amazing.
Yeah. So we need to start with Vim, and if he says, "Yeah, I'd be interested in that," let's go to work on those guys.
Right.
All right. Yeah. See you.
See ya. So I pulled, I was going through just some of my old interviews and stuff and things that I pulled. And there's this one quote from my dad that I just wanted to share. He talked about how a heightened sense of being, that's the function of the director to provide an audience. Now that certainly embraces learning, exposure, illumination, insight. That's all included in the heightened sense of being, heightened experience. That doesn't mean it's strictly emotional experience, because what's going to trigger that emotion can be intellectual, it can be physical, it can be spiritual. And what we were talking about earlier with Samantha, and how our fathers, their characters are emotional. They're emotional beings. It is a heightened sense of reality that they bring into their films. Certainly my fathers were highly emotional, almost melodramatic in some cases. You think about like Bigger Than Life, the big splashes of red, the James Dean, you're tearing me apart,
Yeah. That kind of catharsis you get when you're emotionally involved in a film. I just watched a film last night. It really doesn't have, it has a little bit of a connection just in terms of the director was one of the people originally on Blacklist, although he later came back and was one of the guys who named names. But there was a movie on Turner last night of one of my favorite Graham Greene adaptations called Into the Affair with Deborah Carr and Van Johnson. And I'm not a big fan of Van Johnson, but it's certainly one of his best performances. But Deborah Carr's emotional range in that film and her spiritual awakening in that movie and the way she performs it and lives it in the movie and the way it is captured on film is startling. And it really is a gut punch. And it really reminded me the collaborative nature of movies. You look at some of Edward Dmytryk's other films, and there's not another one I can think of that has the kind of like you feel like your insides have been sucked out after you watch it. And Deborah Carr, in some ways, was kind of the auteur of that film, just being but the people around her certainly facilitated it. And you've got her in a love triangle. She's married to Peter Cushing, who would go on to be a big horror icon in England. as her civil servant husband, who, despite his repression and his awkwardness in social situations and his shyness, is really a very loving and good person, although he doesn't know how to deal with that. And Van Johnson, who is her lover, and who is a writer, in some ways, you would think both these guys would be more tuned into her. And though both are love her, they really are not as in tune with her. And her grief over being torn between these two different people is stunning. And it's the kind of thing that I saw in your dad's movies, Nicca. Like, that's one of the things that really is a gut punch in one of my favorites by him that I know you need to go back to is bitter victory. I have to bring that one up again. Richard Burton and Ruth Roman in that movie, and Ruth Roman at the end of that movie really just destroys me. And there's movies that Sam did too. Richard Widmark and Gene Peters have a really charismatic, emotional connection in that movie. And I think for actors to be able to achieve that a kind of emotional connection, not just with each other, but with themselves, and really get down into their guts and pull that stuff out, they may or may not, like, Brando really, or James Dean, have to use the so-called method. But you get other people like Robert Mitchum who just instinctively felt things and didn't need to draw on certain methods because he was um, somebody who'd experienced everything and really he didn't have to think twice about it. He didn't have to kind of intellectually think his way into the right modality emotionally to get into character. But I don't know. I'm kind of like talking myself into a corner here, but both your dad and Sam, and there's so many other directors who have been able to do that. I see it in a lot of different directors' work, and sometimes they're not even the ones to bring it out. It's the actors themselves who kind of make the movie, or it's the writers. I'm trying to remember. There was a movie recently I saw where the writer was certainly, I think, the main auteur of the film rather than the director. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that facilitating that emotional connection is one of the most ephemeral but important things to capture on film. And your dad had the gift of being able to
he
connect.
was a master at that. He was a master at bringing actors out. I think giving space for them to fully be that safe.
They feel safe. They feel safe to do that.
You can't, if you're, acting, you can't really go the limit if the people the director and the crew aren't making you feel safe, and I think that I believe my father was an emotionally driven person. I'm an emotionally driven person. I don't think that he was able to make a movie without bringing the emotional life into it. I think that, that brought him some problems. You know, I remember talking to David Thompson about my father's work, and you know, the feeling that Nick wasn't one of them. He wasn't, you know, like the other directors. He wasn't like the producer. He wasn't like the people who were on the set with him, and it set him apart. And he was, in a sense, forever the outsider, you know. So he just didn't know how else to be. I mean, that's my take on it, you know, and everything, like his use of camera, his the music that was chosen, if he had to say, you know, all of that stuff.
Mhm.
You know, I remember Janine Bessinger, the film scholar, she would talk about how like the camera was an incomplete. The camera was a character in my dad's movie. It wasn't like, oh, the camera goes on when the actors are starting to act and having the scene. The camera's already going when the action starts to take place, and the camera continues when the action stops, and it creates this life. There's a life underneath what's happening in my dad's films, which is his mark. You know, yes, there's the acting, but underneath there's that thing that
Yeah.
just you just feel, and that it's almost as if it's my father's soul, you know, there.
Yeah. Well, it's a way, you know, metaphorically, it's a way to start the fire. And if you don't have that spark or that match to light, you're lucky if you get it, you know. And your dad supplied that to that ignition to so many movies. And I, you know, despite when we were discussing Johnny Guitar and about Joan Crawford, to me, it's like Joan Crawford is one of those actresses that really is capable of emotionally uh, pulling your guts out. I mean, when she's really good, like in Mildred Pierce, or there's some of her other melodramas, like A Woman's Face, which I think stands up very well to the Swedish original with Ingrid Bergman. Joan Crawford could really do that. But you know, a lot of times ego gets in the way. But I read something really interesting, is that she really originally, when she was asked to be in Johnny Guitar, I don't think it was your dad who approached her. I think it was I don't know if it was a producer or Republic Studios or what it was.
Studios, I believe.
Yeah, and she was originally not going to be the one who's going to strap on a six-shooter and you know, do all that stuff. And she really fought to be the alpha female. And
Yeah.
Sterling Hayden, who has a very strong character in the movie, is more passive and doesn't even wear a gun until the later part of the movie. And then you've got Joan up against Mercedes McCambridge, who I'm sure your dad probably got along with her better than Joan. But seeing those two together, and that the fact that your father was on the other side of the camera, seeing those two go at it it's one of the real pleasures of that film. I mean,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
it's like seeing two volcanoes erupt and fight it out. And your dad's if you look at other Republic Westerns, there's Republic Westerns by directors like Alan Dwan, who certainly made some decent movies. But the way your dad kind of took that color palette that you see
Oh,
in Republic Westerns, and he uses it almost surrealistically. And I hate to, sometimes people will come in that debunk the auteur theory and say, oh, he wasn't even paying attention to that or blah, blah, blah. But there's so many directors who use color. And I think your dad in Johnny Guitar, in Bigger Than Life, Rebel
right.
Without a Cause, the way he uses color is very similar to the way Douglas Sirk uses color. The Japanese directors, Seijun Suzuki, to bring in somebody who's very disparate, but they use color to express emotion. And you see it in Italian directors like Fellini. You see it even in Italian directors, genre directors like Mario Bava, who really understood the significance of how to use color on film. And I think that's another part of your dad's legacy that is not talked about very often, and that there's very few other directors. I think the only Hollywood directors, and of course Douglas Sirk was from where was he from? Germany or Austria? But of course he worked in Hollywood. And then Hitchcock. They're the only other two directors I can think of who worked in Hollywood who really had that sense of color. And you see it in a lot of French movies from the late 50s, early 60s. You see it in Godard's films. And in Godard's films, I think it's maybe a little more self-conscious sometimes, but you see it in Claude Chabrol's films too, I think, especially his 60s films. Anyway, I'm starting to go off on a tangent here.
You can't leave out Bertolucci either, a little later.
Bertolucci, yeah. Well, so many of the Italian, the way they use color in cinema is amazing.
I have a great little tidbit from Bertolucci. Speaking of Bertolucci, when they met, my dad and Bertolucci met in the 70s. And when I spoke to Bertolucci, he talked about my dad's freedom and described it like the frivolution. There should be a revolution, and he made up this word, the revolution to the frivolution, and it was just like an expression of like how my dad was at this party and just so free spirited, and it's the frivolution. Let's get back to that. Let's be a little bit bold and like punk rock days. Let's just like create something new and be bold and have a movement and not care so much if it's going to make money or all that stuff. Let's go for the frivolution. Let's bring that back.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Let's not wait for somebody to tell us it's okay to do that.
Exactly.
We
be there now. Who knows if we're going to make money again?
Exactly.
Danik, who knows? But I'm all for that frivolution. With Bertolucci, huh?
Yep.
I've been really turned around since I found out about the scene with Maria Schneider where they do the butter, and she was not aware that what they were going to do. And him and Marlon came up with this idea because they wanted to have the newness of her being violated in that scene, and she never got over that in her life. And I thought that what she should have done at that time was at the end in the last scene when they filmed that, she should have put real bullets in the gun. So they got a real reaction from Marlon Brando getting shot for violating her earlier. That would have been the way to handle that situation, right? But I just wanted to throw that in there. I'm sorry. And so I think that we're on that tail end of this. But you guys are just so wonderful, and it was so great to have Samantha with us. You know, I want her everywhere with me. You know, I just want wherever I'm going to be, especially on here, she should be with me. You know, somewhere.
You
Right?
know, she's very much her mother's daughter as well as her father's daughter. If you ever meet Krista,
Well,
you know,
yes.
Krista is amazing, and when you're in conversation with Krista, she remembers everything, and she's a joy to talk to. About film, and you know, I won't have seen her for years, and I saw her at Dennis's party, and you know, she remembered my name and remembered the last time she saw me, and you know, I mean, Krista's Samantha really comes from two people that are pretty amazing people. So yeah, it's like your mom Betty, which I never got to meet her, and I know from you she's a legend, and among your friends who met her, she's a legend. So let's not forget the mothers too. So
Right.
No, I want to meet Krista. And also, Samantha said that she's been working on her mother's memoir. So who knows? Maybe
yeah,
Road Three Rooms Press will be repping the Krista's book as well.
yeah,
But right now we have Nicca's book,
yes.
Ray, who's right next to me here. That way.
Here I am. Oh,
I got to go this way. There we go. But you
that,
figure
that
this.
way.
I can't figure out which way to turn. I'll be honest with you. Now, if I put my look, that's the opposite way. So there we go, that way. Go right over there. Like, and we have Christy from LA, who's hopefully going to catch up on his sleep after this. Not saying that you weren't fully with us, but
Oh yeah, I kind of woke up by the time Nicca and I started talking. It was good you guys talked a little bit before I got into the picture, because
yeah. Well, that was the plan, but we were going to start out a little differently. But Samantha, what a refreshing!
oh yeah,
What a refreshing presence, yeah. And I can't wait till we can all get together. You know, maybe at Hollywood Way, the whole
Yes.
lot of us.
Yes.
Your friend Philippe or something from Montreal.
Yes.
He was watching, and
It was so good because I sent him the info. Awesome.
he said hello, and he was looking to see you next spring. I think we
Yeah,
told
he
everything.
wanted to come.
Yeah.
And we
So-
were supposed to come last week and do
Right.
the
Me first.
Montreal Film Society screening of They Live by Night. Or
Right.
was it on guitar? They Live by Night.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We were coming up. Kat and I were coming up, and
Yeah.
the best laid plans.
So next spring. So we can all start saving.
We'll say for next spring, we'll take the train up there. We'll get our own, you know, what do you call it?
yeah, and it remains to be seen if we'll be wearing masks or what. We'll
Right.
yeah.
All I know at this point, no matter what they say, we know one thing, that people spread the virus. So right now, Sartre is right. Hell is other people. So I'm
So stay home and read. Yeah, stay home and read Ray by Ray. A daughter's
buy it. First you have to buy it if you don't have a copy, and then read it. Ray by Ray.
Yeah, it's very good pandemic reading as well as reading for any other time in history. So
the only thing I like about this, you know, I like the live streaming, and I enjoy that. I think that if we put some more time into it, we'll have some great ideas. Maybe we could fit in some clips. We could fit in some other things, you know, when we get more comfortable with this. But the thing I like about it is I have two different colored socks on, and nobody knows. Nobody
knows. Right? It's like, what am I wearing underneath this? You know, leave it to the imagination.
Yeah. None of us have pants on, so
yeah, exactly.
I want to thank you so much. Okay, thanks for coming on with us, Chris. You're a wonderful guy, and hopefully we can do this again down there. Maybe near the end of the month, we'll come up with a different tack, and figure out another cast to bring in and do some more film talking and talk more about Nick's films and Nicca's book and your own knowledge of film history. So I think it'd be great to have you back. So let's think about that, and I'll pitch you again later on down there toward the middle of the month later later on in the month. Okay. All right.
Sounds great. Nicca, it was so good to see you again, and
It was so good to see you.
we'll talk soon. Say hi to Jesse.
I will.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Nicca, we love you. You know that. She's on the cover of her book. That's her. And she's right there on the other side of me, too. It's the modern world, the 21st century. 21st century. Here we are, locked down, but still on the east side and west side of Manhattan, we can still do this. We can do anything, right?
We can. We can.
So
you
can buy it along the bottom there, order directly from us, threeroomspress.com shop. It will be there, and you'll learn so much more about Nicca and her father and her father's films and her mother and her entire family. We didn't get a lot into your family this time, but we'll save it for the next show. Maybe we can spend a little more time together. But let's talk on let's talk and brainstorm about who else we can bring on one of these.
Okay.
And let's try to put something together before the end of the month.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. You take care, all right? I love you.
I love you. Love Kat. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're Ray by Ray, Daughter's Take on the Legend of Nicholas Ray by Nicca Ray, who's been with us the whole show. Please get her book. That's what we're here for. It's an enjoyable book. It's an incredible book. It's a mind-blowing book. It's a great book to read now during the pandemic, as our dear friend Chris said. So let me end this broadcast, and thank you for joining us. And we'll see you on the next time, and we'll definitely see you on the other side of this madness. Take care. Peter Karloftis, Three Rooms Press. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.